Fantasy Football Junkies. You are tuned in to the #1 source for fantasy prognostication. It's Testosterone Fantasy Sports with your hosts, Jeff and Jesse. So listen up. Here's your chance to gain the edge over the competition and dominate your fantasy football league. Every week we break down all of the matchups and tell you who to play as well as who should ride the pine. This is the joint that every fantasy junkie needs, so check it out!
What is up, Fantasy Football Nation and Minnesota Vikings junkies out there everywhere? You are tuned in, of course, to Testosterone Fantasy Sports right here on MCN Channel 6. It's Jesse in the house. Joining me, as always, my good buddy Jeff and a very esteemed guest, Jason Powell of fanball.com on the set. It's good to be with you guys.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's the show that we always like to do, and it's week 15, so
16.
week 16, yeah. Already I'm making mistakes on the show. But we're super happy to have you here, Jason. I see you're donning the excellent Chester Taylor. We got the whole backfield, plus the best running back up until now.
Yeah, of all time as far as Minnesota Vikings goes. And Jason, knowing that you are an ardent follower of our show, watch it on a weekly basis, I know you know how big of an honor it is to be invited on to the Purple segment. I've known you for a little over a year now. We know you're a Purple fan, so in this situation, you got to let the Purple love flow.
I'll do my best.
All right, man. Well, we're going to talk, of course, starting this week. We've got a really a must-win game against the Washington Redskins coming here to play the Minnesota Vikings. It's been moved to Sunday night, but before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the game that was, Jeff. Any surprises? What was your reaction to the Monday Nighter against the Bears?
Well, I was impressed about how the Bears really came to play. I thought that their defense really stepped up. They wanted very much to stop Adrian Peterson in our rushing game. Obviously, Adrian was able to get things going much better than he did against the Niners. But I was a little bit surprised at the lack of Chester Taylor. It didn't seem like they got him into a flow much. And part of the reason is because in the second half, it seemed like Adrian imposed his will on the Bears.
And some bad mistakes in the passing game for us. Now, we had seen Tavares Jackson, T-Jax, we like to call him, play a couple good games in a row, Jason, and really Vikings fans have to be a little bit dismayed with the performance he put out there. Yeah, Monday night, but come on, man, 3 interceptions and a fumble. Pretty bad play from our quarterback.
Well, he took a step backward, no doubt about it. But, I think the first interception was kind of knocked into the air. You can't really fault him too much. The one that got me was the one right before halftime. Just a horrible interception. There was no reason to throw that ball. If you're going to throw it away. And they really need him to step up big this week, and I'm sure we'll talk about that because Washington has a pretty solid run defense.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like he's a developing player, so I don't feel real negative about what's going on. It makes sense that when a player of his experience level takes a few steps forward and has some good games, then everybody's all singing his praises. Well, he stepped back to earth in the last game, normal, typical way a player develops. And our team, what I liked about that was our team rallied around him. Nobody got down on him, and we went out and we won the game as a team, and we said, one quarterback does not a team make.
Yeah.
We're still the better team all around.
Right. And I agree with you too there, Jeff. I mean, on the heels of that point you're making, I think that when you look at the Minnesota Vikings, the reason this team has been resurgent is not because of our quarterback play, but it's because we have 7 Pro Bowlers on this team. We get it done on both sides of the ball. We had the Williams Wall stuffing the run in that game. Those guys playing at a high level. Darren Sharper coming up with a big interception late. And of course, we've got the great running game, a stellar offensive line. So I think the quarterback position, although that's the high profile spot, the rest of this team, Jason, is the reason why we've got on a roll. And I think people forget that the whole team, 22 guys, is what it takes to win on the field.
It does, and unfortunately, I think if and when we get into the playoffs, the downfall could still be the quarterback and the wide receivers, and they're playing better, but there's still a long way to go in that area. I guess another thing that really bothered me on Monday night was the play of the offensive line. They'd been so good in the games leading up to it, and they struggled. Adrian Peterson didn't really get going until probably the third quarter. You can even make the comment that he didn't because it was a fluke play that he scored on where they almost botched the snap, and to his credit, he got in there, made a nice play. But it wasn't like he was just getting off against that Chicago run defense, which really hasn't been that good all season long. Keep in mind that one of their players, defensive tackle, was on the practice squad of another team a week before the game. and
Painful.
He ended up putting up good numbers against the Vikings' supposedly great run defense.
And Urlacher several times throughout that game, Jeff, knifing into the backfield, making plays. Is this something for Vikings fans to be concerned about here?
Well, I personally thought that it looked like Tavares had some stars in his eyes, it being the first real nationally televised game that he'd been a part of. So it felt like he was kind of rushing through the progression of getting up to the line. It didn't seem like he surveyed the scene quite enough. But I also really thought that the Bears defense disguised their blitz very, very well. And I also thought that they rush blitzed a lot. And yeah, you can say that Matt Burke, you needed to pick up or be a little more wary of Urlacher. But also in that situation, Adrian standing back there, and he's the primary thrust against the oncoming linebacker. And if Tavares were to slow down a little bit and check and see the blitz coming, he can then alert Adrian to watch out for it. And Adrian's going to be able to stop Urlacher. That's man-on-man, size against size. And I just think that that all played into it. And two, the Bears defense got torched by AP in the first game to the tune of 224 and 3, and they were not going to let that happen again on Monday night. It was plain to see from the gate.
Did you guys get the sense that it wasn't so much Burke? I know there's been a lot of criticism of Burke, the way he played in that game. I don't know that it was so much him as just there seemed to be a lot of miscommunication on that line, because that Urlacher play is a perfect example where he just came storming up the middle, and Burke didn't even look at him. So it just seemed like somebody missed an assignment there. Could have been Peterson, but there seemed to be a lot of miscommunication on that offensive line.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous waters anytime we, as non-professionals or non-insiders start breaking down blocking schemes, because we really don't know, whose responsibility those certain plays were. But at this point, Vikings fans should really hang their hat on this statistic. Tavares Jackson, a 69.6 quarterback rating so far throughout the season. You look at quarterbacks that are down there in that high 60s range. You're talking about guys like Kyle Bowler, Chad Pennington, Cleo Lemon. These are teams that were eliminated from playoff contention a long time ago. So it kind of speaks to my point that this is a squad that if they were involved in a game like this earlier in the year, guys would not have been able to pull out a victory. But, Jason, they come away with a win on Monday night, even though the fact they didn't play their best ball.
No, they didn't, and boy, it came close at the end, though. Sharper was beat badly on that play. And, to his credit, he got back there and made the pick, but, I sat there when that ball went in the air and I saw where he was. I thought Berrien was coming down with that, and we were going to overtime.
Yeah, thank God for Darren Sharper and for the player that he is. Our defense has really stepped forward. I know a couple of years back when we had the dynamic offense, our defense wasn't very good. And so it's really nice to see those four guys who are stepping up as leaders. In my opinion, I know this is Pro Bowl stuff. The Pro Bowl ballots just came out. E.J. Henderson's having one of the best seasons at linebacker. I consider it a snub that he didn't make the Pro Bowl. I think that there will be a couple of years where he gets in here in the next two, but he's been such a dynamic spark for us on the defensive side of the ball that's how we're going to win in the playoffs if we're going to win, and that's how we won this game. We stuffed their defense or their offense. It wasn't hard.
Yeah, Kyle Orton had a lot to do with that too. So and EJ did get the, I think it was the second team honorable mention, so he could go potentially as a fill-in, but our defense has played well throughout. And guys, we're going to need our defense to step up here this week, because in the flex game that we love so much as football fans, this week the NFL schedule makers have chosen to move the Washington Redskins Minnesota Vikings game to the Sunday nighter. We're gonna welcome Al and the big fat guy that we all love to dish on, John Madden, to our house here. It's gonna be the eyes of the nation focusing in as both of these two teams, Washington and Minnesota, alive for a playoff spot. At this point, this is a big game, Jason.
Oh, it's the biggest game of the year for the Vikings by far. And really, they all are at this time of year when you're barely, you barely have that lead over the Saints, and if you lose a game and you end up tied with the Saints have the tiebreaker. Redskins in the same boat. We lose this game, and the Saints win. All of a sudden, we're looking at the back of two teams instead of leading the pack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you broke it down exactly, and I think that it looks good for us because we do control our own destiny. So if we can hold out and beat the Redskins, in my opinion, the Saints have a very tough matchup. They face the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't think the Eagles are much of a slouch. So I think that there's a chance here that we'll be ringing that playoff bell here at the end of this weekend's game.
Well, if everything breaks properly for us throughout the day on Sunday, guys, if New Orleans does fall to a Philly team that's really playing with a lot of pride right now because they don't have anything else to play for other than Donovan McNabb wanting to try to prove his wares if he does end up going somewhere else. But if all the things break right for us during that day, it could be such that if we win that night, we clinch a playoff spot. And as we start looking at this 5-game winning streak that the Vikings are on right now, they've played some pretty bad quarterbacks throughout this time period. This week, we welcome Todd Collins, a 36-year-old journeyman quarterback. This guy was, at one point in time in his career, was Jim Kelly's successor in Buffalo. Like Jim Kelly, I remember that from high school. I mean, that shows you how long he's been around. He has 2 TDs, no INTs since taking over the reins a game and a half ago, but I don't know. I think Todd Collins might be in a little bit over his head here, Jason, against our blitzing defense. What do you think?
To some extent, but I mean, if you're going to say that, then how can you have to say Tavares is in the same boat because he's facing a pretty solid defense himself. Todd Collins has come in and done a solid job for them. He hasn't been turning the ball over. He's not going to win you games, but I don't think he's going to lose you games either. If he can get away with dinking and dunking against the Vikings, the quarterbacks of the Vikings seem to have the most trouble against are the guys who do the 3-step drop and fire, like Brett Favre, and obviously everybody's having trouble stopping that guy this year.
Right.
But I don't see Collins being that type. If they can shut down Santana Moss, keep Chris Cooley in check, and obviously keep doing what they're doing against the run, I think we'll be okay against their offense.
It seems to me like these two teams are so similar. They both run the ball very, very well. Neither team has much of a passing attack to speak of. Both teams good at stopping the run, especially. And so I think this game is going to be a low-scoring game. I think it'll look a lot like the Bears-Vikings game, although I'd like to see some better play out of our offense in the front seven specifically.
Of course.
I'd also like to, welcome back Fred Smoot, and I'm hoping that all the fans out there can really give him the grizzle, and I'd really like to see Sidney Rice over the top this weekend against Smoot. Burning him deep, because Smoot's been pretty good for them.
I don't know that you're going to see Sidney Rice doing much of anything this week by the sounds of it with his injury.
Yeah, the ankle problem, Sidney Rice might not be able to go in this one. They haven't ruled him out to the best of my knowledge yet, but he's definitely icing that ankle. And Sidney, we hope you get better. We certainly need him in this game. We certainly need him if we're fortunate enough to make the playoffs. He stretches the defense and really opens things up underneath for T-Jack to make some of those other passes. But Jeff, you mentioned that these two squads play real similarly. I want to throw some numbers at you guys and just kind of get your opinions. Clinton Portis, 8th in the league in rushing yards. Adrian Peterson, 3rd in the league in rushing yards. Both teams like to run the ball. On the defensive side, our defense, number 1 in the league against the rush, allowing 67.9 yards a game. Their defense, number 9 against the rush. And between these two defenses, a total of only 5 runs of 20 yards or more all season. That means the Vikes are number 2 in allowing the big play from the running side of the game, and the Skins are number 1. The Skins have only allowed 2 runs, Jeff, all season of 20 yards or more.
Well, I think that the Vikings offense will be able to make 20-yard runs all day.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I do. I think it could happen. Adrian, every time he runs the ball and doesn't do much, it makes him more hungry and desire more to do better. And he gets frustrated out there when things don't go his way. So by the end of the game against the Bears, he was definitely given the shots, not taking them. And he seemed to run a little bit different almost. I saw one run where they swept him out around the left side, and as the line kind of created the hole off to the left, he picked and chose his spot. And then when he turned and ran, he went shoulder first. And he just blasted through the first linebacker. I think it was Briggs. And, he didn't take it to the house or anything, but it shows, in my mind, his progression of running more downhill and protecting his body a little bit more and getting the positive yardage without trying to necessarily hit a home run every time.
Yeah, Jason, how close was he to breaking that 98-yarder and taking it all the way to the house, man?
He did come close. One thing I want to point out is that Rocky McIntosh, a really good linebacker for the Redskins, probably going to miss this game. I believe he's even been ruled out already, not positive on that. And on the other side, no Antoine Winfield, or possibly no Antoine Winfield. Nothing official yet, but that could be trouble trying to contain Santana Moss, although he's battled his own injuries this season.
Well, I think football fans are in for a treat one way or the other. This game is going to be hellfire and brimstone. These two teams both playing with a lot of passion. Of course, the Purple wanting to seal up that playoff spot. And of course, the Sean Taylor situation, the guy voted to the first team, first ballot Pro Bowler, even though he's deceased right now. This squad playing with a very heavy heart, but Washington laying it all out on the line. Guys, I think we're going to see a hell of a football game Sunday night.
I agree.
Yeah, both those teams are going to come with heavy desire to win. The Redskins are still trying to make the playoffs, so they're going to be up big. Obviously, we're going to be up big. I guess I'm just hoping the most that Jim Kelly taught Todd Collins everything he knows about how to win big games.
Nice. Well, we want to teach you about how to win big games, and of course, if you're in your fantasy playoffs, it's likely your league's championship game, and it gets no bigger than this. That's why we have welcomed Jason Powell to our set today. We're going to start after this segment is over, breaking down the rest of the NFL matchups in the championship week for fantasy junkies out there. We thank you for tuning into the show, and we'll be right back right after this.